Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Balzers in Liechtenstein, which, by the way, in English can be said either Liechtenstein or Liechtenstein. I tend to alternate back and forth. But as you can see here, I have the tablet out because Liechtenstein is a very small country. Let me show you how small. I'm going to actually tap this and zoom out so you can see exactly where we are if you're not quite sure where Liechtenstein is located. It is here, kind of in, I suppose, Central Europe, and you can see surrounded by the other large countries of Europe. It's dwarfed there between, there's France over here, Germany, even Switzerland and Austria next to it. It seems really big in comparison to how small this country is. So we're looking at a tiny portion of a tiny country here. But this isn't even the entirety of Balzers. This is just the village of Balzers. It also includes this town over here, which I suppose is Males. The umlauts always throw me off, and they're always pronounced differently in every language. I always get the German ones mixed up with the Swedish ones. But it's even more than this here, because Liechtenstein has almost all of its municipalities broken up into various exclaves. What is an exclave? Basically, an exclave is when a part of a country is separate from the majority of the rest of the country. For example, Alaska is an exclave of the United States. Probably the easiest example to pick out on a map since Alaska is so huge. But almost all of the municipalities of Liechtenstein are scattered throughout, and I have a map here to show you. So here's Liechtenstein. You can see the brown here is Balzers, but we also have this section here and this section here. And you can see like this one's split up. Vaduz, the capital city, is here, 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 and here. This one's split up. This one's like, I tried to look up why this is. How did this happen? How did these all get broken up, Why would they do this to almost all of their administrative divisions? And I could not find an answer. If you know, let me know down in the comments, because everything I read about it was like, did you know that Liechtenstein's divided up into all these exclaves? And I'm like, okay, but why? And nothing I could find would say why. It was very infuriating. But here's my theory about Balzers with me researching it. I'm looking at this area on Google Earth, and as you saw, it's pretty much the Alps, right? Like, look at the Alps, which are very huge, jutting, sharp mountains in Europe. So we're like, of course, the whole thing doesn't appear on Google Earth, right? So we're like here in the mountains, and then along here, as you can see, as I'm looking at it, there's really like nothing here. It's beautiful, of course. It's big hillsides, not hillsides, mountainsides, trees, grass, I'm sure little springs and things like that. It's all very beautiful, but it's a whole lot of nothing, right? No towns or anything. So my guess is that maybe some, maybe sheep herders or something in town owned property up in the mountains that they would take their flocks to in the summertime. So once Liechtenstein became a thing and they were dividing it up, there were people who lived here that had property here and here. So they're like, we'll just make that part of the town because some people that live in the town also live here, That's my working theory. Because why else would these areas that have nothing in them be part of this? That's my best guess. Let me know if you have any other hypotheses or if you know the actual reason. I would really appreciate that, especially for future videos. I would really like to know. So here's this tiny little town, and the most remarkable thing about it is this big hillside here. Let's take a look. 3D. Boom. Check it out. It's a big old hill, and on top we can see it all distorted from the 3D. My goodness. It is called Gutenberg Castle. Let's see. There's House Gutenberg. Goodness, I probably have to turn on the everything filter to make it pop up. I guess so. Berg, Gutenberg, that's Gutenberg Hill. Nothing for the castle? You can see it better now in the top-down version. But it's yeah, that's a disaster in 3D, holy moly. It is a little castle up here. Oh, here we go. A very stereotypical looking medieval castle. And it's really pretty. Of course, up in this beautiful landscape. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's a little church there at the bottom of the hill. And all the beautiful mountains of this country. So lovely. But the only real history I can find about Balzers revolves around this castle. And this history starts very, very long ago to a culture that existed here in about 3000 BCE, and we found some cool artifacts on top of this hill. I've got pictures for you. Look at this little guy. Look at this little guy. They call it the Mars von Gutenberg, or the Mars of Gutenberg, because it's a little, I guess, warrior god. You can see his helmet and his armor. But he's just a little guy. Look at his little face. Look at his very small hands. He's really cute. His little feet, little toes. And the remarkable thing about this guy is that he's probably like about this big, right? They found a bunch of other figurines. He's the biggest one. You can see there. They found this little boar. Like, how cute are these guys? They found all of these on top of this hill as a little, whoops, there's the boar. A little deer, very smaller guys. And again, this guy is probably like maybe about like this big. So the details are pretty incredible. But that's all that we really have from that culture. But really neat. Probably Celtic, right? I'm not sure. Originally, there was a church and a cemetery on top of this hill, of course, after Christianity was introduced, and that evolved into a castle in the 12th century. Like a castle fort, because if you know your castles, there's a difference between a castle and a palace. A palace is a lavish house. A castle is fortifications, towers, moats, drawbridges, things like that. You don't find those in palaces, only castles. So this was built as a fort, right, to defend the area. And it certainly did. It was damaged quite a bit in various conflicts, particularly during the Swabian War in 1499. It was pretty much destroyed. By then it was the property of the Habsburgs. It came under Habsburg control in 1314. There were also lots of fires that happened here that destroyed the complex. Parts of it were taken to build other parts of the town here once it was in ruins, and it was in ruins for a good 100 years or so until the very early 20th century, when it was rebuilt to how it looks today, like this, trying to restore what it once was. I'm glad they did, because it's really pretty. I really like it. And that is essentially the history of this area, because again, the rest is just hillside, so I could probably tell you geological history, the creation of the Alps. But I figured I would close this out with a little bit more about Liechtenstein itself. I'll throw the playlist up here so that you can learn more about the country, but I'm sure some of you are wondering, why is there this tiny country in the middle of Europe? Why does this exist? And we pretty much have to thank Napoleon for that, because of course Napoleon, during his heyday, completely redrew most of Western Europe and messed everything up, basically. And when he went conquering through the area, this, I guess, principality, which it still is, it was just like, well, we don't have any German powers over us. There's no Habsburg power. The Holy Roman Empire went kaput during Napoleon time. They're like, we're just going to be independent. And they've stayed that way. When Germany united, Liechtenstein stayed what it was. Of course, Switzerland was a bunch of various cantons. They all united. Liechtenstein always just stayed its own thing, and they've just always been their own thing. Almost like a dinosaur from Europe's past. Because that's what Europe used to be. It used to be a bunch of little principalities and just little tiny countries, a little patchwork quilt all throughout. In Czechia, where else? All down here. Italy, very famously, was a bunch of city-states. Germany, of course, was Prussia, among many other areas. Lithuania is completely different from what it. So it's kind of a little peek into what Europe used to be like. It used to be a bunch of little countries that merged into big countries that broke apart into even smaller countries, so on and so forth. But Liechtenstein prevails, which is pretty cool, I think. It's a interesting little country, let's put it that way. I suppose you'll have to watch my history of Liechtenstein to really go into the details, because we're just talking about this little town here. Is there anything else to show you here? I've got the everything filter on still, so you see all the supermarkets. What is this? Alter Farhof? I don't know. Let's check it out. There's 15 pictures. Let's close out with this slideshow, whatever it's of. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. Maybe it's a shopping mall. If you learned something cool today, give this video a little thumbs up and let me know down in the comments what it was you learned. Next on this series, we are going to a capital city. We have a lot of capital cities coming up, but we are heading over to the capital of Mali in Africa, which, the past week or so, Google Earth's been kind of letting me down in terms of slideshows. Bamako, the capital of Mali, has not. So we will have some good Google Earth pictures to show you, as well as talking about the history of Mali, its rise and fall and rise and fall again, and where Mali is today. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good night.